In this video, I'm going to be discussing some of my top concerns regarding the helicopters in Battlefield 2042, mainly discussing things that I would like to see changed or fixed by the time the full game arrives. Lately, I've been playing a lot of Battlefield 4, and flying helicopters is my favorite thing to do. I literally sit in the spawn screen, spam clicking the helicopter just so I can fly it. So naturally, I was curious to see what the helicopters would be like in 2042. And unfortunately, I was disappointed. And that's for a few reasons. So my first concern when it comes to the helicopters, and what I consider to be the biggest issue, is the physics. The physics just outright feel wrong. They make the helicopters feel arcadey to fly and almost as if they are weightless. It just feels like you're playing a mobile game, to be honest. The helicopters just felt so detached from the rest of the world, as they just felt super unrealistic, whilst the rest of the world was still relatively realistic. I think that the physics are a really important aspect of the helicopter, and DICE need to get it right if they want to make the helicopters more satisfying to fly. It's easier to have a feel for the bad physics when you're actually playing the game, but I'm hoping that this clip is able to show you just how weird and janky the sort of movements are of the helicopter. You can see how it just kind of turns very quickly and almost as if they have no weight. And also when it came to the actual aiming of sort of your crosshair, making sort of micro adjustments was fairly difficult, but I'm not sure why. It was kind of hard to describe, but it was difficult, which also just made the cannons very hard to use when trying to kill infantry. So the lock-on meta is the second issue I'd like to address, which I think is just an aspect of the game that I find very unfun and very unsatisfying to play. Heat Seekers on the attack choppers and on the jets were just way too overpowered, and they lock on super fast, and you can't even see where it's coming from. Your flares also don't last very long, so once you have popped them, the enemy can lock back onto you very quickly, and there isn't much you can do about it. Also, I just found the fights between attack helicopters to be very boring, as it's just all about the heat seekers. Whereas in Battlefield 4, you would use tow missiles or TV missiles to outplay your opponent, which was just way more fun. The fact that there isn't a class system also means that anyone can run a Stinger, which I think is just ridiculous. The fact that 64 enemies can be running around with Stingers, combined with the fact that pilots can't see where the lock is coming from, is just very unbalanced, and it needs to be changed. In Battlefield 4, it was a skill to be able to avoid locks. You had to have good map awareness, as you had to figure out where you'd be safe to hide and avoid lock-on missiles. But in 2042, it just feels so random and like you're getting locked on from every direction with very few ways to counter it. My third issue is not as big of an issue as the first two, but I'm still really not a fan of it, and that is the fact that you can just fly around in third person mode while still being able to aim your cannons and rockets and heat seekers, etc. I think this again just makes the helicopters feel very arcadey, and I think it takes away from the immersion, which is something that Battlefield has typically been so good at. Now, my fourth concern might seem a bit weird, especially after just talking about the whole lock-on meta and the issue of everyone having access to Stingers. But in some instances, it can actually just feel too easy to go around getting a kill streak in these helicopters. The fact that the physics are super unrealistic just lets you zip around the map like a mosquito. And I think that the rocket pods on the Nightbird are just way too overpowered. I think they should nerf the rockets and buff the miniguns, as the miniguns are literally useless for killing infantry. And personally, I find it way more fun to beam infantry down with miniguns using precise aim rather than just shooting rockets in a more general direction to get a kill. The overpowered rockets combined with the fake physics just makes the kills feel less satisfying, whilst the deaths from lock-ons feel buggy and unbalanced. So those are just some of my top concerns with the helicopters in Battlefield 2042. Now obviously this was just the beta, which apparently is a build of the game that is a couple months old, so I'm hoping that DICE has already or are currently fixing these issues so that most of them will have been resolved by the time the full game releases. This is of course assuming that these issues were not intentional game designs by DICE. If that was the case, I'd be extremely disappointed. In closing, I'm optimistic and look forward to the full game, which hopefully will showcase many improvements over the beta.